Usually when you make a major financial investment, you expect a very clear, um, tangible receipt.
Right, something you can actually hold.
Exactly. Like, think about buying a house, right? You put down the money, you sign, an endless stack of papers.
Oh, yeah. And at the end of the day, someone physically hands you the keys.
Right. It's a direct, measurable transaction. You know exactly what you're getting and what it's worth on the market.
It's a guaranteed asset transfer, really.
Yeah.
The value is locked in the moment the transaction clears, and, well, you have a physical structure to show for it.
But then you step into the world of tech certifications and career upskilling, and suddenly that transaction becomes incredibly murky.
Very murky.
You are paying with hundreds of hours of your limited free time, dropping serious cash on exam fees, and the keys you get at the end are just a digital badge.
Yeah, a PDF certificate.
Right. And sometimes those badges don't actually open the doors you thought they would.
Well, it's because you aren't buying a house,
Yeah.
You're buying potential.
Potential.
Exactly. And in the tech industry, the exchange rate on that potential is constantly shifting. It shifts based on technological trends, geographic demands, and, honestly, hiring algorithms that you often can't even see.
Which brings us to the deep dive today. Welcome, everyone. Today, our mission is to analyze a massive stack of 2026 cloud industry career data.
We really want to uncover the real monetary value of AWS certifications in today's job market.
Yeah, so whether you are actively prepping for a career shift or maybe trying to negotiate a raise with your current boss,
Or you're just insanely curious about the underlying economics of the tech world.
right, we are going to cut through the noise. We have the actual numbers, the salaries, and the hard data you need to navigate this landscape. Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just about collecting credentials like digital Boy Scout badges.
No, not at all.
This is about strategic, calculated career building.
And to truly achieve that strategic build, we have to look far past the certificates themselves.
What do you mean?
Well, we need to understand the broader context of what the tech industry actually values right now. I mean, a digital badge only has monetary value if it demonstrably solves a highly expensive problem for the person hiring you.
Okay, so to figure out what those problems are worth, we first have to map the landscape of what these roles actually pay in 2026.
Right. Let's look at the baseline.
Based on the data sources we're examining, we are looking at 4 distinct tiers in the cloud salary hierarchy. At the entry level, you have the Cloud Practitioner.
The starting point.
Then you step up to the Solutions Architect, and from there, the path forks into 2 distinct heavy hitters, the DevOps Engineer and the Cloud Security Engineer.
I want to clarify something before we look at the numbers, though, because DevOps gets thrown around a lot.
Oh, constantly.
Yeah,
Huh?
a DevOps engineer isn't just writing the software product itself. They are building the automated assembly line that delivers that software to the customer.
So they're kind of the bridge.
Exactly. They sit right between the developers writing the code and the IT operations team, keeping the servers running. They ensure that new features can be deployed a dozen times a day without, breaking the entire company's website.
And the data shows that building that assembly line pays incredibly well. Let's look at the actual numbers here.
Let's do it.
Someone holding just a Cloud Practitioner certification is looking at an average base of around $65,000.
Which is largely associated with Tier 1 tech support or maybe software sales roles.
Right. But when you cross over to the Solutions Architect tier, you're seeing a massive structural jump.
Yeah.
We're suddenly looking at a $130,000 baseline in most major markets.
It's a huge leap.
It really is. And then DevOps and Cloud Security, those roles are commanding $180,000 to well over $220,000 in total compensation.
Oh, easily.
But the metric in this data that absolutely blew my mind wasn't just the final salary, it was the return on investment.
Yes, the ROI math is fascinating.
The data actually calculates the specific salary jump per hour of study invested.
What's fascinating here is how it completely shifts how we view educational investments. I mean, it forces you to look at your study time as a literal currency with a variable exchange rate.
When I was looking at the math, it immediately made me think about playing a massive role-playing video game.
Oh, like grinding for stats.
Yes, exactly. You know the mechanics? You can spend 20 hours mindlessly grinding low-level monsters just to get a tiny +1 to your character's stats.
Right, which is basically the Cloud Practitioner route.
Yeah. Or you can spend those exact same 20 hours figuring out the complex mechanics for the boss-level quest that completely doubles your power, which represents the Solutions Architect or Cloud Security route.
Let's break down that math, because the disparate payouts are just wild. Look at the Solutions Architect Associate. You might invest, say, 80 hours of rigorous study.
Okay, 80 hours.
If that certification helps you jump from a $65,000 support role to a $130,000 junior architect role, you just secured a $65,000 raise. So that means every single one of those 80 study hours effectively earned you over $800 in annualized income.
That is insane.
The ROI is astronomical.
But then look at the cloud security track. The study hours there are notoriously grueling. You might put in 200 hours of complex lab work and cryptography theory to get certified.
Right, but there's a reason for that. Security is entirely about risk mitigation. You are being paid to prevent a catastrophic, multi-million-dollar data breach.
Which companies are terrified of.
Exactly. They're terrified of that liability, so they pay a massive scarcity premium for the few people who can actually secure their infrastructure. You aren't being paid for your 200 hours of study.
You're being paid for your ability to solve rare, terrifying problems.
Spot on.
I have to push back on the entry-level side of this, though.
Sure, go ahead.
If we look at the Cloud Practitioner, the data suggests it takes about 15 to 20 hours of study. But because the market is completely saturated, the mathematical salary bump per hour of study is practically zero.
Yeah, the math is pretty brutal there.
So, is the study hour-to-salary ratio the single most important metric for a newcomer to focus on, or is that a trap?
Yeah.
If the ROI is zero, why does Amazon even offer the certification? Is it just a money grab from beginners?
It looks that way on the surface, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But it actually serves a very specific function. It's an overarching vocabulary test.
That's a vocabulary test.
Yeah. Amazon offers it so that project managers, financial analysts, and sales teams can actually communicate with the engineering teams.
Oh, I see.
It isn't designed to make you an engineer. It's designed to make you cloud literate. If you go in expecting an engineering salary from a literacy test, you will be deeply disappointed.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So the math only works if you target the right tier.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because ROI math assumes a frictionless void. It assumes a certification is worth the exact same amount everywhere.
Which is definitely not true.
Right. The data clearly shows that taking a highly profitable solutions architect certification to a market that prioritizes different corporate values completely changes the equation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, geography fundamentally alters the exchange rate of these skills.
Oh, absolutely.
The 2026 data contrasts the United States market directly against the European market, and the macroeconomic forces colliding here are massive.
Yeah, in the U.S., the tech sector is heavily venture-backed and hyper-competitive. They use those astronomical $200,000 base salaries as their primary weapon for talent retention.
Right. But the European market data, specifically looking at France and the UK, paints a very different picture.
Because Europe operates on a vastly different corporate model, right?
Exactly. In France and the UK, you have stringent labor protections, mandated extended vacation time, and different corporate tax structures.
Yeah, the cash is lower.
Yeah, the absolute cash number on your paycheck is going to be significantly lower, maybe $110,000 for a role that pays $180,000 in New York.
But the societal safety net and work-life balance are heavily subsidized.
Exactly. It's a trade-off.
There is a massive anomaly in the European data, though. Luxembourg.
Oh, yeah. Luxembourg is fascinating.
Yeah. A cloud security engineer in Luxembourg is making U.S.-level venture capital salaries. Why is that specific geographic tin so incredibly lucrative?
It comes down to financial technology and the underlying mechanism of sovereign data laws. You see, Luxembourg is a massive banking hub for the European Union.
Okay, so a lot of money flowing through there.
Tons of it.
Yeah.
And they operate under incredibly strict data residency laws, meaning financial data physically cannot leave certain geographic boundaries.
Wow.
And it must be encrypted with keys held by specific entities. So a cloud security engineer in Luxembourg isn't just an IT worker.
They are actively managing the regulatory compliance of billions of euros.
Right. If they configure a server wrong, it's not just a website outage. It's an international banking violation.
Oh, man, the stress.
Yeah. So local industry risk completely dictates the value of the cert there.
So even in the cloud, locations still dictates your leverage.
It really does.
Let's talk about the physical location of the worker, because the tech industry has spent the last 5 years selling this pervasive stereotype of the digital nomad.
Right. The whole work from a beach in Bali vibe.
Exactly. The idea that if you have these cloud skills, you can pull a New York salary while living in a mid-sized city in Ohio, or work for a Parisian bank from a rural suburb 300 miles away.
It's a nice dream.
But looking at the 2026 tracking of true 100% remote roles versus strictly hybrid roles, that dream seems to be colliding with reality. Are true 100% remote roles actually accessible for these AWS cert holders, or is hybrid the mandatory reality in these different global hubs?
Well, the contrast is stark. While entry-level cloud supports and some mid-tier development roles still maintain a healthy percentage of 100% remote options, the high-end roles are different.
The DevOps and security ones?
Yeah, DevOps and cloud security are increasingly enforcing strict hybrid policies in these global hubs.
Wait, if the infrastructure they are managing is entirely virtual, I mean, if the servers literally exist in the cloud, why do they need a physical body sitting in a corporate office chair 3 days a week?
Because of the highly cross-functional, sensitive nature of the work at that tier, let's take that cloud security engineer again.
Okay.
They aren't just writing code in isolation. They are managing physical hardware security modules that sit in on-premise data centers.
Physical hardware.
Yeah, the cloud still runs on physical servers somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And they are sitting in physical conference rooms with legal teams and executive risk committees.
Discussing highly confidential vulnerabilities that a company will absolutely not allow to be broadcast over a Zoom call.
Exactly.
So the higher you go, the more your job is about human trust and legal liability, not just keyboard strokes.
That's a great way to put it. The more a role impacts the core survival of a business, the more management demands that person in the room.
Makes sense.
If you want the highest European salary in cloud security, you likely need to live within commuting distance of that financial center. Your leverage isn't just what you know, it's where you are legally and physically allowed to operate.
Okay. So let's say you've targeted the high ROI certification, you live in the right geographic hub, and you are totally fine with a hybrid schedule.
You're checking all the boxes.
Can you just pass a multiple choice test and walk into one of these jobs? The data provides a harsh reality check.
It really does. This raises an important question, because we have to look closely at the psychology of a modern tech recruiter.
Right.
What a certification proves to them is very different from what it proves to you.
Going back to that entry-level cloud practitioner, the CLF CRO2, we establish it's a vocabulary test.
Yes.
I kind of look at it like getting a learner's permit for driving. It proves you know what a car is, but it absolutely doesn't mean you are ready for the highway.
Exactly. And the data shows recruiters are explicitly filtering out resumes that only have this certification.
Filtering them out completely.
Completely. And even for the higher-level solutions architect, the AWS certificate is often just acting as a basic keyword match to get past the automated software.
So what are they actually looking for?
What they're actually demanding is a GitHub portfolio and proficiency in Terraform and Kubernetes. They call this the minimum viable stack.
If recruiters are demanding Terraform and K8s, are AWS certifications actually taking a back seat to these open source, hands-on skills?
Well, think about the mechanism of how a cloud environment is actually built today. An AWS certification tells a recruiter, this candidate knows how to log into the Amazon website and manually click through 50 different menus to set up a server.
But enterprise businesses in 2026 do not use manual menus.
No, it's too slow. And human fingers make typos. They use infrastructure as code.
Which is where Terraform comes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Terraform uses what we call declarative code. Instead of writing a script that says click this, then click that, you write a file that simply declares, I need 5 secure servers in this exact configuration.
Okay, so you just declare what you want.
Right. Terraform reads that file, communicates with AWS behind the scenes, and builds it perfectly every time.
Wow.
If you only have an AWS certification, you know what a server is. If you have Terraform skills, you know how to build 1,000 of them in 3 seconds.
That's a massive difference in efficiency. And what about Kubernetes? We see it abbreviated as K8s in the data. How does that fit into this minimum viable stack?
Well, if Terraform builds the infrastructure, Kubernetes manages the applications running inside it.
Okay.
Imagine your applications are packed into standardized shipping containers. Kubernetes is the automated port authority.
I like that analogy.
If a container crashes because of too much web traffic, Kubernetes instantly spots the failure and automatically deploys a replacement container before the customer even notices.
So recruiters are looking at people with only AWS certifications as incomplete packages. They know the theory, but they don't have the tools to operate at an enterprise scale.
Exactly. Hiring managers actually have a specific term for people who only hold certifications. They call them paper tigers.
Paper tigers.
Yeah. They look incredibly fierce on a resume because they passed a multiple choice test. But let's look at a real-world scenario. It's 3 a.m. a live production database goes down.
A nightmare scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The AWS user interface is glitched and you can't click any buttons. The paper tiger completely panics because they only know the visual menus.
Right, they don't know the underlying systems.
They don't know how to read the raw Kubernetes error logs to find out why the automated reboot failed.
That makes total sense, and that's why the GitHub portfolio is the ultimate proof.
Absolutely.
GitHub is a platform where developers store and share their actual code. When a recruiter opens your GitHub, they aren't looking at a badge, they are looking at the literal Terraform code you wrote to build a project.
It proves you've survived those 3 a.m. failures on your own time.
The AWS certification proves you understand the rules of the road. But the minimum viable stack Terraform, Kubernetes, and the GitHub portfolio proves you can actually build and repair the engine.
Exactly. Critical thinking and applied knowledge heavily outweigh rote memorization.
So what does this all mean? Now that we've stripped away the illusions about entry-level certificates and defined the minimum viable stack, how do we practically apply this data?
We need to move from theory to a concrete timeline.
Right, because if I am a newcomer, looking at Terraform, Kubernetes, AWS architecture, and GitHub all at once is just paralyzing.
Which is why the data sources outline a highly recommended, highly structured 12-month path from zero to employed. You have to sequence this correctly.
This pacing reminds me of building a house or even training for a marathon. You cannot start framing the roof, which in this case would be the complex automation of Kubernetes, before you've poured the concrete foundation.
Right, which is understanding basic AWS networking.
Exactly. If you try to learn automation before you know what you are automating, the whole structure collapses. How does a beginner actually pace themselves across this 12-month timeline so they don't burn out before they've built out that crucial GitHub portfolio?
Well, the pacing directly connects back to those study hours we discussed. Let's break down the blueprint by quarters.
Okay, let's hear it.
Months 1 through 3 are your concrete foundation. This is where you knock out the Cloud Practitioner and the Solutions Architect certifications.
Just focusing on the basics.
Right. You are putting in those 80 to 100 hours of high ROI studying just to learn the vocabulary, the architecture, and the underlying rules of AWS networking.
Okay, so Q1 is purely theoretical. You pass the exams. But Q2 is where you pivot.
Completely. In months 4 through 6, you must stop taking multiple choice tests. You transition to practice.
Okay.
You learn the Linux command line. You learn some basic Python scripting. And you start building tiny, poorly configured things in the cloud just to see how they break.
I've always found that breaking systems intentionally and then having to reverse engineer the fix teaches you more about the mechanics than any textbook ever could.
It builds vital muscle memory. It really does. Then, in months 7 through 9, you tackle the heavy lifters, Terraform and Kubernetes.
Okay, so Q3 is automation.
Yes. You take those manual things you broke in Q2 and you learn how to automate them with declarative code. You learn how to deploy containers.
And then Q4 is entirely dedicated to packaging all of that into the GitHub portfolio?
Yes. Months 10 through 12 are for building 2 or 3 capstone projects. You integrate AWS, Terraform, and Kubernetes together into a single functional project.
And you document the code beautifully in your repository.
Exactly. So when you sit down to the interview, you don't talk about your exam score.
Yeah.
You walk them through your code.
I appreciate how logical that sequence is. It forces you to focus only on the phase you are currently in, which is the absolute best defense against information overload.
It's the only way to survive the learning curve, honestly.
All right, let's distill this deep dive down for you, the listener. We've covered a massive amount of ground today from this 2026 data stack.
We really have.
First, we learned that the efficiency of your study hours matters way more than the sheer volume of certs you collect. You want to aim your time at the high ROI, complex problem-solving roles of the solutions architect and cloud security, because those are the problems companies will pay a premium to solve.
Second, remember that geography and risk liability drastically alter your leverage. The U.S. venture-backed model offers higher base cash, while Europe offers a stronger social safety net.
Right.
And if you are targeting those high-end security or DevOps roles, understand the mechanism of why they are hybrid. You are managing legal compliance and physical hardware, not just virtual code.
Third, the entry-level certification alone is really just a vocabulary test. The real hiring currency is the minimum viable stack.
The paper tiger cure.
Yes. You need to understand how to use declarative code like Terraform to build infrastructure and tools like Kubernetes to orchestrate it at scale. Compiling those skills over a strategic 12-month blueprint and proving it with a GitHub portfolio is how you actually become employable.
You now have the cheat sheet to the 2026 cloud job market, you aren't just guessing anymore. You have the data to build your own career ladder strategically.
You really do. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to explore on your own.
Let's hear it.
We talked at the very beginning about how investing in tech upskilling means buying potential and how the exchange rate is constantly shifting.
Right.
Given what we just uncovered, specifically how recruiters are prioritizing open source automation tools like Terraform and Kubernetes right alongside AWS, I have to wonder.
Wonder what?
If the actual daily work in 2026 relies so heavily on vendor-neutral open source code, will the concept of a single vendor cloud certification eventually become completely obsolete?
Oh, wow.
By the end of the decade, will those digital badges be replaced entirely by multi-cloud, hands-on coding tests where you just have to prove you can build the system, regardless of whose logo is on the server?
That's definitely something for you to chew on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.